Welcome and thank you for tuning into today's update. Now I'm going to kick off with the United States today and then go on and look at Australia and then a bit about what's happening in other European countries. So that's kind of the timeline for today. We might do the UK, we'll see how time goes. Now the United States and Australia are interesting and contrasting countries. Australia basically has acted early when there's been resurgences. It hasn't always been that good at public health measures in terms of the general population's compliance when the cases have been low. It's had kind of a false sense of security. But when the threat becomes real, then the authorities in Australia have acted. So I'm reasonably optimistic about the situation in Australia. Obviously, we'll be thinking about Victoria, where the situation is particularly bad. The United States is a slightly different position. And let's just say my concerns are greater still for the United States. Although there are some encouraging trends of a downward trend in new cases, that there's difficulties to know exactly what the data is saying in the United States and confused by different sources of data. So it's not clear, but it's certainly true to say my optimism about the Australian situation does not really transfer to the US situation. But let's try and put some detail on that. So we're talking about facts rather than waffly things. Now, the United States, of course, the cases are greatly increasing. We know this. Now, of this nearly it's getting on for 5 million cases now, isn't it? Of this number, 40% of these cases were in July. So there's been a real surge in cases in the United States over the past weeks. 40% of all of these cases occurred in July. And the deaths have increased in the United States, of course. Well, of course, that's always happens. The deaths are always going to increase. They're not going to go down. But because of this lag effect, these increasing cases that we've seen over the past weeks in the United States, and indeed there's still an awful lot of new cases coming every day, this is going to feed through into higher death rates in the United States. So unfortunately, the United States needs to be braced for more deaths in the next month or two because of this lag effect from the cases to the complications to deaths occurring. But unfortunately, there are going to be inevitably reasonably high numbers of deaths over the next few weeks. Now, of course, the United States has got trouble at the moment with the hurricanes up the East Coast, all the way up to New England, apparently. Now, people that are going to refuge centres, pleased to see that masks are required in centres for people to retreat to away from the effects of the floods and the hurricanes. Nevertheless, there's the possibility for people being really quite concentrated in these areas, so it could be a real problem if it's not dealt with very well indeed. So the hygiene, the masks, the physical distancing. Of course, it's difficult because you get a large number of people in a small area for the refuge from the weather, so it's going to be difficult and could result in some cases. Let's hope it's well managed. Now, house parties in Nashville, river parties in Illinois, rave under the bridge in Brooklyn. Now, to all these people that are taking part in these social events who are not observing social distancing, I've just got a word to say. Most of these people are fairly young, so you're probably going to get fairly minor illness, if any at all. A few of you will get a more severe illness, and a small number of you will die, but most of you won't, so don't worry about that. And don't worry either, because the people that you're killing, you'll never know their names, you'll never see their faces, you'll never hear the grieving relatives cry. You know, you won't know, there'll just be a statistic. You won't know the person that you have indirectly or virtually directly caused the death of. So just go and carry on having a good time, because it probably won't affect you personally, and you exercise your personal freedoms. Never mind everyone else. So that's my comment on these parties that we're seeing going on in the United States. Now, I do hope the press is picking up on these to be serious again. Well, I was being serious then. I do apologise for being sarcastic. It's either that or get so cross it would be unpleasant on a video. What I'm hoping is that these things are picked up by the press and are in no way representative. And of course, the vast majority of people in the United States are behaving responsibly. And by virtue of the fact you're taking the time to watch this video, you're behaving responsibly as well. So my congratulations for behaving properly. It's the right thing to do. At the end of this pandemic, you can look back and you can look back at the horrendous numbers that are going to accumulate. What are the deaths going to be here? We're heading in the direction of 200,000 deaths in the United States before Christmas, maybe even more. And when this pandemic's all over and it's all gone away, you can look back and say, you know what? I don't believe I'm responsible for any of those deaths. You can do that. Louisiana, highest cases per capita at the moment. Concerning trends, California, of course, there's more cases, but California's got, 40 million people in California, just under 40 million, I think. Mississippi as well is heading in the wrong direction, and the mayor of Jackson was saying the situation is dire in Mississippi, or in his area in Jackson. So again, southern states being badly affected. Now, moving up to the north, Chicago. Now, Chicago did try to open up schools again, but there was a cluster of cases from that. So they were moving to a hybrid system where people were taught part online, part remotely, and partly in school. But it looks like they're moving to a more all-online system now. As indeed, I think that's already happening in San Francisco. I think New York is trying to make up its mind which way to go. My prediction is New York will probably have to move on to this all remote, all online direction, because if they do open up the schools again, that there will be clusters. I think that's fairly inevitable, really. Now, Dr. Birx, White House task force, everyone seems to be slagging her off at the moment. She says no region is immune, and she talked about the huge number of cases yesterday. So Nancy Pelosi had a go at her, then the president seemed to have a go at her. So Dr. Birx won't be watching, but if you are, ma'am, you have my full support, because I believe you are genuinely data-driven from what I can see. And it's a pity people are having a go at you. I'm not. I'm supporting you as far as I understand you now. Now, the Navajo Nation. Now, this is really upsetting. This is something I feel strongly about, is First Nation groups. Navajo Nation, highest death toll per capita, mostly in the southwest of the United States. Intermittent electricity in many settlements. 30% have no running water. And water has even got uranium contamination from previous irresponsible uranium mining. Of course, that stuff will kill you no time at all. It's radioactive. It's very dangerous. Now, 30% no running water in the United States in 2020. This is a national indictment, of course. And let's hope the US cavalry gallops over the hill to save the people in the Navajo Nation who are dying at such a disproportionate rate, albeit a metaphorical cavalry galloping over the hill to help these people. Quite honestly, it's the least that can be done. Yeah, California, there we are. I knew I had that figure from somewhere. 39.5 million people. Now, Gavin Newsom is saying, actually that was yesterday's figures, well over 500,000 cases, heading in the direction of 10,000 deaths. Now, this is, again, problems with the data in the United States. This data here is from the governor's office directly. A lot of people have died. 8 million tests. Now, the rate of positive tests is very important. So if you take all the tests that are done at the moment, 7% are coming back positive. And that's down from 7.5% coming back 2 weeks ago. Now, it's not a big difference, but at least it would be more concerning if it was in the other direction. So, but that's still a pretty high rate of positivity. meaning, of course, that there's a lot of the virus endemic in the population at large, is what that means. Gavin Newsom, this virus is not going away. It's not going to take Labour Day weekend off, Halloween off, or the holidays off. Until we have a vaccine, we're going to be living with this virus. And I agree with that 100%. So that's the United States. Now, before we go on, I think we'll have the reliable saying of the day. Here we go. Pretty powerful, really. It's not my idea. Thank you, Justin, for that. So that's the reliable saying of the day. Masks are critical, not political. Masks are critical, not political. Well worth memorising that. Then feel free to recite it whenever you think it's appropriate to do so. Now, moving on to Australia now. Number of cases, deaths, relatively low. Now, yeah, right, okay. Apologies time to all the people of Australia. I formally apologise for calling your leaders of the states governors, not premiers. You have governors in another country, not in Australia. You have premiers. So now there's a serious point here, actually. Probably about 100 people have messaged me and emailed me saying, look, you got this wrong. We don't have governors, we have premiers. That's the United States. Don't get us mixed up. And indeed, people in the United States might not want to be mixed up with people from Australia. But the point is, it means that I'm not getting away with things. I say something wrong and people come down on me like a ton of bricks, which is absolutely brilliant because it means that essentially I'm being peer reviewed. So that's great. You know, I'm just delighted to be picked up. I read as many of the comments as I can and put likes and things on them, but there's not enough hours a day to answer all the comments and on all the emails, so my apologies for that. But it is reassuring to know that if I say something wrong, you pick up on it. Because I know as a lecturer, if you say something wrong, you probably get away with it because the students might not know. But, you know, to me, that's always been the cardinal sin of teaching, really. You have to get the facts right. It has to be right. And if it's wrong, people pick up on me, and that's brilliant. So that's good. And whenever I make a mistake, I'll always come back and tell you, of course. Now, Victoria. Now, there's news reports that in July, 53% were not isolating between getting a test and getting the results. Now, there were delays in Victoria in testing. Some results were coming back in a couple of days, but others were taking a week. And people, 53%, more than half of people, were not self-isolating while they waited for the results. And of course, when you are at the day or so before you get symptoms and for the first few days after you get symptoms, that's when you're most infectious. So that's what's probably triggered off this episode in Victoria. Because of poor compliance, people wouldn't take the time to self-isolate. More than half did not between getting testing and getting the results. Then if you get a positive test 5-6 days later, and you've already been at work for the last 5-6 days, what's the point in getting tested? Now, Victoria, another 439 cases in the past 24 hours. That's the cumulative number. 6,706 active cases. Testing's going well. Deaths, sadly, 147. Hospital admissions, or hospitalised at the moment in Victoria, 416. 35 of those in intensive care. And the Australian government publishes excellent data sets, and in actual fact, the data from Australia is probably some of the most accurate that I've come across. It seems to be very good quality data, and there doesn't seem to be any debate about it. Now, just quickly, New South Wales, total number of cases, but number of cases currently much less. So really, it's only Victoria. Well, Victoria, there are cases in New South Wales now, but Victoria is the worst one. Hospitalised in New South Wales, 13 people, 8 of whom are in ITU. So much lower numbers of hospitalised cases than in Victoria. Now, other parts of Australia, they have had cases in the past, but it's fairly well under control now. This is why it's so critical to isolate Victoria and eliminate the virus there as far as possible. Queensland, total number of cases, but mostly in the past. 7 in hospital, none in ITU. Western Australia, previous cases, a few live cases, but very few. Hospitalised patients, 0. South Australia, again, cases, but hospitalised patients, 0. So the rest of Australia is actually doing really quite well. Tasmania, no one hospitalised, 229 cases in total. Northern Territories, only 33 altogether. 3 in hospital for some reason at the moment, but none in intensive care. Now, a quick review of Europe. Now, this is new daily confirmed cases per capita. So this is adjusted for population size. And we're actually on the logarithmic scale today here. So obviously we've had big spikes of cases. They came way down following the European trend. But recently, Norway is going up rapidly. The overall numbers are still very low, but that's clearly something that needs addressed. Italy is drifting up. Germany, a fairly consistent increase in cases. The UK, now it's clear we do have an increase in cases. France, an increase in cases. And Belgium has had a rapid increase, but it looks like they're dropping off a bit. But this is just a 7-day rolling average. So that is that's interesting. Basically what we're seeing is a definite resurgence of cases in Europe. I think that graph tells us that fairly definitively, really. And of course that's from our World in data, where you can make up any graph that you like. Now, just to give a few examples of this, Spain, 24 hours up till yesterday, 968 new cases. But 3 days last week it was over 1,000. So is there a difference between that and that? Probably not statistically significant. Well, it will be, but only it will be statistically significant, but it won't be. I'm not sure it indicates a trend, is what I'm trying to say. But Spain wasn't actually on that graph, but Spain is actually doing quite a lot worse than all the other European countries. So of all the European countries at the moment, Spain is most concerning, the increase in cases. And especially the Spanish are publishing data on active clusters. And they currently have 560 active clusters. Now, it's very encouraging that Spain is doing this kind of regional data because, as we looked at yesterday, the local response is absolutely vital, but there's an awful lot of them. 560 active clusters is a lot of clusters. So cases going up highest in Spain of any European country at the moment. Italy. Total cases, total deaths. Now, the cases in Italy are about 1.5 million of the population. So this is the official number of people tested positive. But the real number, as we see, is 1.5 million people almost certainly have been infected. And this is from the health officials from antibody studies. So this is based on serology throughout Italy. So it looks like about 2.5% of the population of Italy have been infected. It's about 1.5 million people. So way more people actually infected than have been officially tested with the antigen. So the antigen tests represent the real number of positive tests that have come back. The antibody tests, where we get this overall prevalence of or overall proportion of the population that have been infected. These antibody tests aren't done on the whole population, they're done on representative samples of the population, and then the number is extrapolated up to the whole population. So, but of course the antibody testing, if it's done statistically well, and it is in Italy, then this data is going to be pretty accurate. So we can say with a fairly high degree of confidence, 1.5 million people have been infected in Italy, 2.5%. But of course, that means that well over 97.5% of the population is still vulnerable to the virus. We are just nowhere near herd immunity. This is still near the start. There's still well over 95% of the population in Italy have not been exposed to this novel virus and will not have immunity to it. Now, assuming that the deaths are 35%, which roughly they are, 350,000, which roughly they are in Italy, and assuming that the numbers infected are 1.5 million, this gives us an infection fatality rate of 2.3%. So 35,000 deaths, 1.5 million cases, infection fatality rate 2.3%, which is high. Italy, of course, did have a predominantly older population, which could explain that. But still, for an infection fatality rate, that is still a pretty frighteningly high figure, especially as it's based on data which is now very likely to be accurate. Belgium's had a lot of cases. ITU admissions there have increased, and as we saw, the number of cases has increased in Belgium. Now, the situation in Belgium here, so we see the cases have increased. They're now going down, but the number of patients in ITU is going up. And of course, that is perfectly explained by this lag effect, that after the cases, so we have the transmission, the incubation period, people are ill, then they can deteriorate, then they can be admitted to hospital, then they can be admitted to intensive care with further deterioration. There's a big lag effect. And that's what Belgium is currently suffering from. So the cases in intensive care in Belgium now probably contracted the infection some weeks ago because of this lag effect. But that means because of the lag effect, the number of cases in intensive care is probably going to be following this trajectory upwards for some time. That's why the pessimism about the United States was justified, because of the upward trend. The deaths lag behind that upward trend. Right, I think I'm going to leave the UK there, otherwise we'll be going on forever. I might come back and do a separate one on the UK. Let's just close with... let's look at a few of you. Actually, I haven't got many here. I've only got a couple of you. But that's good. Now, this is Kathleen, who is in California. And we are hoping to have a chat with Kathleen fairly soon, which will be interesting, I'm sure. So she's a physician's assistant in California. Now, this is Melissa, who's an art teacher. And she sent us in an interesting picture. To get Doctor Who in the States, if you're in the States and you don't get Doctor Who, that won't make any sense, but that's a nasty machine called a Dalek that we get in English culture. Okay, so I think we'll leave that there for now. I've got quite a few things to say about the UK. I think we'll do that as a separate video, because there's a lot of new information out from the Office for National Statistics and quite a lot of significant information flowing from that.